I wasn't supposed to be in her kitchen that night. The excuse was the sink, dripping again. Her landlord hadn't bothered to send anyone, and I'd offered to take a look, though I had no idea what I was doing. I told myself it was just neighborly. Truth was, I wanted to hear her voice up close, not just muffled through the thin walls we shared. Elena. That's what I called her in my head, though I almost never said her name aloud. Too sharp, too final. She was in her mid-40s, maybe a little older, with the kind of stillness that made every movement deliberate. Even pouring water into a glass seemed like something she'd thought about twice. I was 23, all restless hands and nervous chatter. And that night, I couldn't stop noticing the small things. How she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear without thinking. How the light from the stove lamp made her skin seem softer than it should at midnight. The wrench slipped in my hand, clanging against the pipe. I cursed under my breath. She was leaning on the counter, arms crossed, watching me. Not mocking, not impatient, just watching. "You're going to flood my apartment before you fix anything," she said finally, her voice low, almost amused. I laughed too quickly. "Maybe, but then you'd owe me dinner for trying." Her brow lifted. It was the closest thing to a smile I'd seen from her. "That's how you think it works?" I didn't answer. My throat felt dry. I tightened the joint, testing the pipe, pretending I knew what I was doing. My pulse hammered too loud in the silence between us. The drip stopped. Or maybe I just imagined it had. I sat back on my heels, turning to look at her. She was closer than I thought. I could smell her perfume. Faint, not floral, something warmer. For a second, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the fridge. I realized my hand was still braced against the cabinet, inches from her thigh. Too close. Or not close enough. She noticed too. Her eyes flicked down, then back up. She didn't move away. That's when the words slipped out before I could catch them. "You should tell me to stop." Her expression didn't change, but I saw her fingers tighten against her arm, gripping her sleeve like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Finally, she spoke, barely above a whisper. "Don't touch me." It should have been enough. A warning. A line drawn. But her body stayed exactly where it was, tense, unmoving, as though she wanted me gone and wanted me to stay all at once. I swallowed, the air thick between us. My voice came out rougher than I meant, the words tumbling without permission. "Then why aren't you moving away?" Her breath caught, a sound she hadn't meant to make. Her eyes lingered on mine a second too long, a second that felt like an hour. And then she turned, sudden, sharp, grabbing her glass of water like it mattered more than anything in the world. She sipped, her hand trembling just enough that the rim clicked against her teeth. I didn't move. Couldn't. The wrench was still in my hand, heavy and ridiculous. All I could think about was that sound she'd made, the one she hadn't wanted me to hear. That was the first night I understood this was more than curiosity, more than kindness. It was something I shouldn't want and couldn't stop. I told myself I wouldn't go back the next day. But when she knocked on my door, asking if I could help carry a box from her car, I didn't hesitate. The box wasn't heavy, just awkward, filled with books that smelled faintly of dust and old paper. She said she was sorting through things from her old office. She didn't say why she no longer had the office. I didn't ask. I just followed her up the stairs, listening to the way she breathed as we climbed, steady but a little too deliberate, like she was counting each step. Inside, the air in her apartment carried a different weight that afternoon. Not the casual quiet of neighbors, but something more personal. The curtains were half drawn, shadows spilling across the floor. A half-empty mug of coffee sat on the table, the surface cold and untouched. She told me to set the box down, then lingered by the bookshelf, sliding one volume into place, then pulling it back out as if she couldn't decide where it belonged. I realized I was watching her more than I should. The way her fingers traced the spine, hesitant. The way her shoulders tensed when she thought I wasn't looking. "You don't have to stay," she said suddenly. Her voice clipped, like she regretted letting me in so easily. "I know." But I didn't move. My hands were still on the box, though it was already on the floor. She glanced at me then, quick, almost defensive. "You're too young to waste your time here." The words stung more than they should. I wasn't sure if she meant here in her apartment or here with her. I wanted to tell her I didn't care, that it didn't matter. But the truth caught in my throat, unspoken. Instead, I asked quietly, "What happened to the office?" Her hand froze on the shelf. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she exhaled slowly, turning just enough that I saw something raw in her face. Not sadness exactly, but the shadow of it. "Divorce," she said. Singly a word, flat and heavy, falling between us. I nodded, though I didn't know what to do with it. She looked down at her hands, twisting her ring finger as though something should still be there. I'd never seen her this undone. It felt wrong to witness it, and yet I couldn't look away. "I'm sorry," I murmured. Her laugh was brittle. "Don't be. You don't know me well enough to mean that." Maybe she was right. But standing there, the distance between us thinning with every breath, I felt like I knew more about her than I should. I shifted, meaning to leave. My body leaned toward the door, but my feet wouldn't follow. She noticed. Her eyes softened, the hardness slipping just a little. "You could stay a while," she said, almost casually, though her voice wavered on the last word. That was the moment I should have left. Instead, I sat down at her table, across from the cold coffee she hadn't touched. Her hand brushed my arm as she passed, so slight it might have been an accident. But it wasn't. I felt it linger, the heat of it burning long after she'd moved away. And just like that, the risk became real. I told myself I'd only stay a few minutes. Long enough to be polite, to not make her think I was lingering for something more. But time in her apartment didn't move the same way it did anywhere else. I found myself studying things I had no right to notice. The way she lined up her books too neatly, the faint chip on her coffee mug, the framed photo turned face down on the windowsill. Little clues she hadn't meant to share. She sat across from me at the table, chin resting on her hand, watching like she was trying to decide what I wanted. I didn't have an answer. I only knew that every second I stayed, leaving felt harder. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Regret what?" "Letting him go." The words hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to take them back, but she didn't flinch. She didn't scold me for crossing a line. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly, her gaze sliding away from mine. "I regret different things," she said finally. "Not that." I nodded, but I couldn't ignore the sharp twist in my chest. The honesty in her voice hit harder than I expected. She reached for the mug she'd abandoned earlier, wrapping her fingers around it even though the coffee was long cold. Her hand trembled slightly. "Your hand's shaking," I said before I could think. She stilled, looked down at her knuckles. Then, without speaking, she placed the mug back on the table and flattened her palm against the wood, steady now, deliberate. My own hand was already halfway across the space between us. I should have pulled it back. Instead, my fingers brushed against hers, light as static. She didn't move. Not at first. Her eyes met mine, and for one suspended breath, it felt like the rest of the world had fallen away. Then her phone rang. The sound shattered everything. She pulled her hand back as if the table had burned her. The screen lit up with a name I didn't catch, and she turned the phone over quickly, silencing it without answering. The silence after was worse than the ringing. "You should go," she said softly. But her voice didn't match her eyes. Her gaze lingered on me, unsteady, caught between invitation and retreat. I stood because I had to. My body resisted every step toward the door. When I reached for the handle, I realized she hadn't moved. She was still sitting at the table, watching, as if waiting for me to defy her. I almost did. My hand tightened on the knob, but I didn't twist it. "Not yet. Do you really want me to leave?" I asked, my back still to her. The silence stretched, long and fragile. Then came the faint scrape of her chair against the floor. A single step closer. That was where we left it, hanging in the air, a question neither of us was ready to answer, and a line trembling beneath our feet. I didn't mean to come back the next night. But there I was, standing in her doorway again, my hand still tingling from where I'd knocked. She opened the door slower this time, like she'd debated whether to answer at all. "Elena," I started, but her look cut me off. "You shouldn't be here." The words were steady, but her voice wasn't. It wavered just enough that I stepped inside before she could stop me. She didn't move out of the way. We stood too close, both pretending it wasn't deliberate. My throat tightened. I couldn't stop thinking about yesterday. Her lips pressed together, her hand gripping the edge of the door like she needed it for balance. That's exactly the problem. I should have agreed. Should have apologized and walked away. Instead, I heard myself say, "You didn't really want me to leave." Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp, almost furious. But beneath it, something else flickered. Something she didn't want me to see. "You think you know what I want. she asked, her voice low, dangerous. I swallowed. I know you didn't move your hand. The silence after was brutal. She stared at me, her jaw tightening, her breath shallow. Then, almost in a whisper, I haven't let anyone touch me in over a year. The confession stunned me. My chest tightened, heat rushing to my face. She turned away immediately, as though she'd said too much. I shouldn't have told you that, she muttered, pacing toward the table. But I followed, my words spilling before I could think. You don't have to be ashamed of it. She stopped, her back to me. Ashamed? You don't understand, Theo. You're young. You can't possibly know what it's like to feel like you're invisible. I cut in. My voice cracked on the last word. Her head turned, just slightly. The anger in her posture softened, but the tension between us didn't. If anything, it grew sharper. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. I stepped closer, close enough to see the fine lines around her eyes, the way her breath trembled when it left her lips. Then tell me to leave, I said. Her gaze locked with mine, unblinking. Seconds stretched, unbearable. Her hand twitched at her side, like she wanted to reach out and stop me, or pull me closer. But she said nothing. The silence was louder than any argument. My pulse thundered in my ears, every nerve in my body waiting, suspended. Finally, she spoke. Not loud, not soft, just steady enough to slice through the air. What are you doing to me? I tried not to see her for a week. I thought distance might cool whatever had been building, but it only made the pull worse. Every night, I found myself listening for her footsteps in the hall, for the soft creak of her door closing. Finally, I gave up pretending. I told myself I had a reason, a book. She'd once mentioned liking poetry, offhand, while shelving her things. So I showed up at her door holding a worn paperback, the excuse clumsy but better than nothing. She opened the door slowly, her expression guarded. When her eyes fell on the book in my hand, she almost smiled. Almost. You brought this for me. I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Thought you might like it. Her fingers brushed mine as she took it, lingering a fraction too long. But then her face changed. Her thumb froze on the inside cover. She flipped it open, her eyes narrowing at the handwriting scrawled across the first page. To Mark. For the nights that saved me. E. Her breath caught, sharp. I frowned. What is it? She closed the book too quickly, clutching it to her chest. Where did you get this? Used bookstore. What? Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw something I'd never seen before, panic. That was my copy, she whispered. The room tilted. I looked at the inscription again in my mind. E, her initial. Mark, her ex-husband? My throat tightened. I didn't know, I said, my voice rough. She sank into the chair like her legs couldn't hold her. Of all the books in that store, you had to bring me that one. I moved closer, helpless. I swear it wasn't on purpose. I didn't. I believe you, she cut in. Her hand gripped the edge of the book, knuckles white. It's just that poem. He used to read it to me when we were young, before everything fell apart. Her voice cracked on the last word. The silence that followed was unbearable. I wanted to take the book back, to erase the look on her face. Instead, I reached out and covered her hand with mine. She didn't pull away. Elena, I said softly, you're not with him anymore. That doesn't have to own you. Her eyes glistened, the guard she always wore breaking for the first time. And when she finally spoke, it wasn't anger or dismissal. You don't understand. That book. It was the last gift I gave him before I knew he didn't love me anymore. The words gutted me. I squeezed her hand, harder than I should have. Then let it mean something else now. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to answer, but nothing came out. We just sat there, staring, our hands tangled around a memory neither of us had expected to face. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if we were about to fall apart, or finally fall into each other. The book sat between us on the table like a wound that wouldn't close. She hadn't touched it again since setting it down, but her eyes kept straying toward it, as if she couldn't decide whether to shove it away or pull it closer. I wanted to speak, to fill the silence, but every word felt dangerous. Finally, she broke it. This is a mistake. Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, twisting the hem of her sleeve, gripping until the fabric puckered. Maybe, I admitted, but it doesn't feel like one. Her laugh was small, bitter. That's exactly why it is. I leaned forward, the distance between us shrinking. Then tell me you don't want this. She looked up sharply, her eyes wet but blazing. Don't make me say it. You already know. The weight of her words hit me harder than if she'd pushed me away outright. I reached across the table, covering her hand again, and this time she didn't flinch. "Elena," I whispered, "I don't care about the rules. I don't care about the years between us, or what people would say. I only care about what's right here." I pressed my palm to my chest. "With you." She closed her eyes, and a tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. I had never seen her cry, not once, and it broke something in me. "You're too young," she said finally, her voice trembling. "One day you'll look at me and see nothing but mistakes." I shook my head fiercely. "No. One day I'll look at you and remember this, that you let me see you when no one else could." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The clock ticked in the corner, the world outside going on without us. Then, slowly, she pulled her hand from mine. My chest tightened, bracing for the goodbye I knew was coming. But instead of pushing me away, she stood, stepped around the table, and stopped in front of me. Her hands hovered at her sides, trembling, until she finally set them against my shoulders. "I shouldn't," she whispered. "I know." My voice cracked. "But you are." Her forehead rested against mine, her breath warm, unsteady. For a second, the world held still. No past, no future, only the fragile truth of that moment. Then she drew back, her eyes searching mine with a question I couldn't answer. "This changes everything," she said. And she was right. Whether it lasted a night, a year, or fell apart tomorrow, we'd crossed a line we couldn't step back from. Morning always comes more quickly when you don't want it to. The light crept through her curtains, pale and insistent, spilling across the table where the book still lay open. She was already in the kitchen, moving with quiet precision, every gesture deliberate, pouring water, setting 2 mugs on the counter. 2. The sight nearly undid me. It wasn't a grand gesture, not a confession or a promise. It was something smaller, more fragile, but it felt heavier than anything she could have said aloud. When she placed a mug in front of me, our hands brushed. Neither of us pulled back. For a long while, we drank in silence. The night before hung between us, not as guilt, but as something unspoken, a truth we couldn't take back. She looked tired, but softer somehow, as though part of her had unclenched. Finally, she broke the quiet. "You don't know what happens next," she said. I nodded. "Neither do you." Her eyes lingered on me, searching, as if she expected me to regret it. Maybe part of her wanted me to, but I didn't. "I only know I don't want this to end with you wishing you'd stayed invisible," I said. The corner of her mouth twitched, not a smile, not quite, but close. She set her mug down, her fingers tracing the rim. "You make it sound easy," she murmured. "It isn't," I admitted. "But maybe that's the point." The quiet stretched again, but it felt different now. Not a wall, but a space we both shared. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You've ruined my excuses," she said, almost teasing. I laughed, though my chest ached with the weight of it. "Good. Someone needed to." Her gaze softened then, not the guarded look she always wore, but something clearer, warmer. It wasn't a declaration, not a promise of forever, but it was enough. We sat there until the mugs were empty, the world outside moving forward, the clock ticking on the wall. And when she finally reached across the table and let her hand rest over mine, steady this time, no trembling, I understood. Whatever this was, however long it lasted, it had already changed us both. She'd let herself be seen again, and I'd learned that sometimes the risks worth taking aren't the loud, reckless ones, but the quiet moments you can't walk away from. I left her apartment later that morning with the sun warming my back, carrying the memory of her hand in mine. Not a secret, not a scandal, just the beginning of something neither of us had expected to find. And maybe that was enough. Sparkle's final reflection for the audience. What do you think? Did Elena make the right choice letting him in? Or should she have closed the door? Would you have taken that risk, knowing it could change everything? Speech Balloon, share your thoughts in the comments below. Thumbs up, did you enjoy this story? Open book, what kind of story should I tell next?